I'm your host, Carrie Arata, Akashic Records reader, psychic sleuth, and spiritual guide. And this is The Infinite Dance, the Akashic Podcast. All right, welcome back to all of you that have been listening. Thank you. And if this is your first episode of the Infinite Dance, I would say this is going to be part 3 in a 3-parter. So you might want to go back and listen to part 2 and part 1 just to have it make sense. And it is International Podcast Day. So happy International Podcast Day. I am so enjoying doing the podcast. It has definitely been such a passion project, and I'm not going to lie, these last couple episodes have been tough, only because regurgitating a story where you've gone through trauma and when you've gone through a lot of painful experiences, it's hard to go back and revisit them. And I know this is healing, and I really feel like it's so much more beneficial for the person that has gone through the traumatic or harder times, and those listening. We've all gone through tough times, right? And we experience the highs and the lows during those tough times. So I know this is healing on so many levels for so many, not just myself, but I'm pushing through, telling it. And this last one was really hard. This is part 3 of part 1 of # moving in the time of COVID. And I'm titling this one the Blairsden experience, when the second part of moving in the time of COVID was to a small town in Northern California called Blairsden. And, this is my experience during a global pandemic, trying to do all the things, right. I thought I knew I was going to move back to California at some point. I had lived in Colorado for about 15 years. Of course, no one thinks you're going to make any plans around, a pandemic. But here I am, and receiving help from family. And this is really how healing, generational healing, looks, at its finest in all the spectrum of the healing process, the pain, the sheer terror, the why did I even come back, right? I should have just stayed where I was, there were so many things going through my head, like so many of us during the pandemic, especially at the beginning, and now as we're still in it, still with so many unknowns. And these things could have happened anywhere. My process of life could have happened in any town. It just happened to go down in Blairsden. And, Blairsden's a small town in Northern California, the Eastern Sierra Nevadas. It's also dubbed, this area, the Lost Sierras. And it is full of so much space and a ton of trees, a ton of mountain lakes that you can swim in. You can get in these lakes. They're not so far up that you can't, do things on them, kayak, paddleboard, canoe, or just swim. And the people, were just really, really great too. Just, I met a decent part of, people that I connect with the things that, I'm interested in. And so that was really cool. But without further ado, let's get into part 3 of part 1 of # moving in the time of COVID. We left off last time, and I was having full body chills as I turned onto the last stretch heading into Blairsden, I got so agitated. I was sitting, and I remember just almost feeling like I had like I was gonna start itching all over. I mean, it was so irritating, and I got so grumpy, and I started complaining about how far it was from Reno, where my folks were, and my brother and his family. And it's kind of funny because here I am complaining about the distance. I was the only person in the family that moved out of state, and lived there for 15 years. And here I'm like, well, I'm going to be more than an hour away, like what's going on? But here's that gut instinct, right? I mean, it's hitting me on all levels. I'm getting grumpy. I'm physically feeling very uncomfortable. And, my gut's saying, okay, there's some trouble ahead. This is gorgeous looking, but there's going to be some things that are really tough. And, I was kind of like, I don't think this should happen. But then I was also like, but where am I going to go kind of thing? And I know there was fear that was basing a lot of this happening the way it did, meaning the timeline. I mean, maybe if there wasn't fear of, I have 2 cats, and my folks aren't used to animals in the home. We always had animals, but they're mainly outdoors. And which, is tough for me. That's, I couldn't see having my fur children not near me. I enjoy their company. But the fear of, what if she was to get on her feet and stay with us for 4 or 5 months, find work, whatever, start to rebuild the practice, things like that here, and then move forward. But it was kind of like, so there was a lot of fear. And I mean, there was just fear swirling all over, I mean, think about, go back. As I know it's really tough. When we all first found out about the pandemic and COVID and grocery shopping and moving around, I mean, anything, right? You got to close this business down, that business down. I mean, it was fear times 100. So I don't know if that would have been able to be, I don't know if that would have been able to be something we could have done differently. But, again, we're trying to make decisions about, let's move forward. And it's kind of exciting. Okay, let's buy the folks thought, let's get a family house that we could have as an investment property, and have a place to go. Because even though it's a solid hour, there's 2 ways to get there. The way I was going, getting the full body chills is a little bit longer, so it's an hour and a half. If you take another route, it's only an hour, about, depending on what area of Reno you're in. But it's solid. And so, yeah, it's a place that people in the area will go to get away. Because there's less people, you could still be at mountain lakes, you could still hike, you could still cross-country ski. I don't think there's any actual downhill ski hills up there. I could be super wrong, though. There probably are. I mean, it was the pandemic, so I didn't, try to see about skiing in the wintertime. But, so it's a place people go to get away. That's nearby, you don't have to go too far. And so that makes it really appealing. And when we turned onto the main road in the little area that the house was, and then you turn onto one more road, and that's where I saw the golf course. And I was like, oh, so it's right here, because then we turned down one more street and there was the house. And I know a lot of people like to golf, and I'm not complaining necessarily, but for me, I would never be like, oh, it's my dream to live on a golf course. It's actually the least place I would want to live. I know, you're like, what? When I was, I don't know. I think I was just 30, maybe a little bit, 31. My ex that I was with for forever liked to golf, and sometimes I would go with him, and we were golfing one day, and I went to get a ball in the trees, and the next thing you know, I felt something hit my head, and I started screaming. I knew I wasn't going to die, but I could not see because of all the blood gushing down my face, and I immediately sat down, and I was just screaming because I couldn't see. And when my ex would hit the golf ball, it would deflect to the right, and it deflected right into my forehead, and it was definitely I felt like a scene from like Carrie the movie. I mean, it was, again, blood just gushing down, and I ended up having to go to the hospital and getting stitches. So to me, golfing is like one of the most violent sports, and it's the only one that, I had to get stitches from in all the different sports I played. And so, being near a golf course is definitely like really low on the list for me of places like I wouldn't choose, right? And when I had asked my folks, when they were telling me, we were looking at the houses and, okay, where's it going to be? And, okay, there's a golf community. We've stayed here before. I said, but it's not on the golf course because that would give me massive anxiety. And I'm kind of already anxiety ridden because it's a pandemic, no practice. The future is unknown. And so, oh no, it's not on the golf course. Well, lo and behold, it wasn't like on the golf course, but it was across the street from the houses that were on the golf course. So, and I would have some golf balls on my front lawn. And so to me, that's a little too close for comfort. So I was already having a bit of anxiety there, right? Well, look, I made the turn, right? And knew, right? The instinct kicked in and was like, nope. This is absolutely not going to be what's going to work for you in what you were thinking. A safe place to be in the mountains, near water, near family. And so we went to the house. Of course, we don't have keys yet because we're still waiting on that inspection. But we start looking around, there's a little back deck, and we went up to the back deck, and there's a sliding glass door, and I look at my mom, and I'm like, I'm going to try, and I did, and it was unlocked. So we both went in, and to look around, and, it was really one of those things where it was like, why would you not want to look around? It was a turnkey, and we had a list of things they were keeping, and we said okay to. And so, you don't want a pile of other things in a home that you're going to have to get rid of, That's doesn't sound great. So we both went in. We really, like I said, want to take stock of everything. And I wanted to see the house in person. I just seen it in pictures. And, it was just the right size. It wasn't too big, 2-bed. It had 2 bathrooms, and there was a huge garden tub in the master. So yay. And because that's one of my favorite things, this Mintakan was extremely happy to be able to take long baths. And there was the back deck. And it had like one of those like, what is it called? Lattice fences. So it's not like an actual fence. You could still see through it. And that was around the deck. So there wasn't an actual yard. There's like the side yard. But again, it's not like a privacy yard or, you couldn't if you have a dog, send the dog out to the yard, kind of thing. It wasn't that kind of thing. And the neighbor behind seemed really close. And I was like, But I was like, well, I'm living out here alone. So maybe it'll be nice to have people close by, right? And it's a slightly, there was all kinds of people in the neighborhood. There was definitely some other single folks, young family, but a lot of the people were retired, or part-timers, so maybe they were still working, but it was a second home. Many of the homes in this area were people's second homes. So cruising around the house, but we're like, all right, we probably shouldn't, stick around too long in it without having the key. But the check was cashed, so it's like, it's really just waiting on that one little technicality. And, a million people were buying homes at this time. So the office of the inspector was definitely overloaded. But I couldn't shake the uneasy feelings that I had gotten coming in, and I was still feeling, pretty off. But we decided to go to lunch like we had planned, and made our way to the Coyote Grill, which my mom had liked. She had already been there, and I had already been asking her, I'm like, can we maybe get a hold of the realtor? And maybe we could actually do this legit, like have him give us a key, because there was a lockbox on the front door, or, he could bring us by, whatever. And she kept really hemming and hawing, oh, I think he's too busy. And I'm like, well, we're his client, so, and again, this could have been something we could have checked in with before we headed out, because we had planned on heading out there. But after we get done with lunch, she actually called him, and oh no, we went by his office. I think we went by his office, because the office was in the little area that the home was. So it wasn't in a separate area of this town. It was in the same area. And he said, give him a little bit of time. And so we sat there on this bench. I think she was the only one that could go in the office. You could only have one person going in an office. You know how they were doing that at one point, about 3, 4, 5 months into the pandemic. And I remember sitting on the bench and still feeling uneasy from getting those full body chills. I just started crying, and I was like, I just don't know about this. I'm getting such uneasy feelings. And she's like, well, I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm like, and I still had this feeling of I might mess up. Okay, we're all deciding on this, but it was such a weird thing of, but I might mess up again. Well, what did I mess up on? What was I feeling so guilty about messing up on? There was, life. And I look back at all the different aspects of my life up to then and was at peace with everything, moving away, spending time, the amount of time I did with my ex, although I know it was probably about 4 or 5 years longer than I should have been with him. But, that's another story in and of itself. But, of why I stayed longer. But, I was feeling really this, I don't want to mess up, and I think I was trying to process those feelings of, what is this gut instinct of yuck, right? Here I'm in this gorgeous area and having this opportunity to rebuild myself with the assistance of my family. That's what's kind of going in the back of my head. So we get, he agrees, he comes out, we make it over to the house. We all go inside, and I remember wanting to look through the drawers and just see what is going on in that regards. And this realtor, who I call Tom number 1, there's a Tom story in this sub-story, a Tom story. stood there in the middle of the front room with his hands on his hips. I swear there was like, smoke coming out of his nose. He just seemed so irritated. And I remember thinking, okay, he could have just given us the key. There's a lockbox, there's not an issue whether or not our end it's going to go through. So what's happening? And I would ask him questions like about cell phone coverage, in a smaller town. That's always nice to know. And he would be like, oh, Verizon, he was just not helpful. Really like that almost like that irritating feeling I was feeling, right? The full body chills and stuff. And, I was like, what is this guy's problem? Because any other realtor I've had to purchase a house or have a friend that's a realtor, they're so hospitable. They're so like, how can I help out? They're so good at like doing all that. So it was so weird to have somebody so grumpy. And the one thing I did notice was the garage was full of junk. And some of the stuff we agreed on, like some yard, rakes and things like that. But then there was like boxes of just junk. And I wasn't able to go through them though, because we did agree on like yard supplies. But that would have been nice because we didn't want to stick around with, Tom number one, the worst realtor in the world, standing there with his hands on his hips, just like, why are you here? So we left the house not seeing really much more than when we snuck in. No questions were answered about things that were left, other than things that were agreed upon. And, I was still feeling pretty anxious. And I at that point was like, I don't know if I could do this, all this different energy was not great. And, but, I kind of talked about it with my mom on the ride home and was like, if it's not the great, the place that's going to be great, then I can always move. And, at that point, what am I going to do? I just moved all of my things from Colorado. So it's like, okay, maybe it's just nerves, maybe it's just past stuff. It was really hard to process still. I don't think there was a ton of clarity. Like I would get hits like that, right? But as far as like my own stuff and what I needed to go through, it wasn't super clear. And, all right, our plan is still in place to proceed. I can live there, pay the mortgage, pay the bills with pandemic unemployment assistance, getting in this online job, starting to rebuild my practice, trying to get more of an online presence, which is really, really hard for me. I have a really hard time with that. Soak in the tub, long soaks in the tub, walks in the forest, swimming and stand-up paddleboarding in the mountain lakes. That sounds like me. I got this. I can do this. This is great. 7 weeks from the time I got to Reno, it was finally moving day to Blairsden. We thought it would be a couple weeks. 7 whole weeks. And I was ready for the fresh start, the clean slate. That's what I kept telling myself. So in my New Mexico themed U-Haul, complete with an alien on it, I made my way to Blairsden. This time through Reno to Highway 395 to Highway 70. That 70 is the highway that leads into on that side, Blairsden. And now at the California-Nevada borders, no matter if you're going from that way, or if you're going 80 into Truckee, there's an agricultural inspection kiosk. We call it the bug station. So definitely had to go through the bug station, which, whatever, no, I don't have fruit. Half the time they just, wave at you, peace sign you. I got to the kiosk and I was asked to pull over to the side. Shit. Feeling a little nervous, like what the heck. They need to check the truck. So I went to get the key, but I had the key to drive the truck, but we had put a lock on the back part because we had loaded it up the night before, and my folks had that key. Double shit. But thank God they were about 5 minutes behind me, and we were able to open up the truck. Phew. And that's a double-edged thing because, I actually commute now into Truckee, so I'm going through a bug station 3 times a week. And, I'm glad they're doing that. They check anything that's big for human trafficking. So I'm really glad that they check. I was just nervous because I didn't have a key, and I was like, I can't comply with you. So I was just nervous that way. But the exit to 70 to get to to get to 70 from 395 was pretty quick after that. And it's exit number 8, and that is one of my lucky numbers. And it's called Hallelujah Junction. And I was like, oh, one of my favorite numbers, and a word of rejoicing. All right, things are looking, all right here. Sun is shining, a little bit of smoke though, right? So we had fires back then, not as bad as these fires this year, but they were bad enough where you were sleeping with one eye open. And your bags are packed. All your important documents are nearby just in case. And so as we unpack the truck and get the cat settled, my dad begins looking all around the property for a propane tank or a gas meter. The house was listed as being heated by gas, but we can't find a tank or a meter anywhere. And we're kind of like, okay, this is weird. It's summer still though, so we're not super worried about that. We can deal with it next week kind of thing. I meet some of my neighbors, Patty and Tom number 2, the town of Tom's, and their dogs, Macy and Jesse. Yay, I'm across the street from dogs. I'm so excited. They moved in full-time 3 years prior from Breckenridge, Colorado. And so we had a little Colorado connection there. And then another neighbor came by, Tawny, to see about if she could have some of our moving boxes for the community garden. And then she says, hey, do you like to garden? I was like, I sure do. So there are 3 gardens in the area that the volunteers called PEPs tended to. Awesome. And she's recruiting me. And I believe that day she actually took me to one of the main ones and showed me the herbs and the little shed and the bird houses that they made. It was really cute. So awesome. I have nice neighbors. And I get to volunteer in the community garden. So I'm thinking, okay, that will help too with not feeling so lonely in a new place. Over the next couple of weeks, I stay busy unpacking and getting the house settled, sleeping with one eye open again because of the wildfires and the smoke. Walking in the forests wasn't happening quite yet. The smoke was really bad. In fact, when I went to the town nearby that had a proper grocery store, ash was falling onto the ground. And so that was closer to the fires at that time. And so, that was a bit daunting too, moving in the time of COVID, a global pandemic, and these, scary wildfires that are hard to get under control in a dry area and climate that we've been seeing here. So, I'm still getting settled. One morning, I could hear a yard maintenance worker doing the leaf blower, thing really loud. And at one point, she had come over to my house, And I was like, oh, hey, we're new owners. We don't, we'll do our own yard maintenance. That's fine. And little did I know there was a million pine needles. But I was like, I still have an able body and I am technically unemployed. So I've got plenty of time to pick up all those pine needles. Plus, it's a fantastic workout. It is an amazing workout. The raking and then the picking up the pine needles and putting them in the bags. And she apologized. She said, oh, I'm just so used to doing it. It was like, autopilot. I'm like, oh, no problem. I was more concerned I didn't want to get charged, some kind of fee. I didn't know how that worked. So cool. The following week, I am at the door. Like, I had my garage door open, and there's a door in the garage that went into the house. And I was standing at the door. I was like probably going in and out, still unpacking stuff. Who knows? Because not only was I unpacking, I was moving stuff because there was, again, turnkey, and there was so much junk. They even left the junk drawer. They left that crap. Like, who wouldn't take out your junk drawer? Nobody wants that. But so there was a lot of other stuff like that. Not your just normal, oh, I'm going to, wipe the window down or whatever. A man walks up the driveway and introduces himself as the landscaper. He owns the landscaping company, and if I'd like to, use his services. And I said, oh, no, we're okay. We're doing it all ourselves. But, it's no problem for me to care for the yard. And, he said he also owns the tavern in town. So if I changed my mind, he knows where he could find me. And I said, yeah, all right. I think the town had like 500 people in it. I'm sure it's not hard to find, anybody there. But I was like, all right. But, I never went to that tavern. I got invited by one lady, but she talked incessantly, and I was like, no, I just can't do that. So now I know where to find him. Tom number 3. Yeah, this guy's name's Tom too. See, town of Toms. So it's now October. The smoke has been dissipating enough to where I can start hike and explore the area. So I was really excited because I love getting out. I love hiking. I love having my little spots that I do. I like having my longer spots to go to, or, my little lunch, my lunch loops, where, it's something I could do, I can go for like an hour hike and just get a nice little, I'm in nature and I'm getting a little bit of a workout kind of thing. So my first drive up Gold Highway to Lakes Basin, and I am passing, I couldn't wrap my head around how many lakes I was passing, and they're all if you're driving up the Gold Highway, they're all on the right-hand side. And I'm like, Goose Lake, Golden Lake. I mean, there were so many, like every, couple 5 miles, there's another lake. And so I had already, though, on my All Trails app, which I love that app, I staked out, I wanted to go to Salmon Lake Lodge. There wasn't a lodge. I guess there is a lodge on one part of it, but the part I was going to wasn't the lodge part. But it was really cool because when she turned off the main highway, the road was more like a dirt road, and there was even this little tiny bridge to go over. I was like, oh, this is great, right? So I'm sitting, I get to the little area where you can, sit by the water's edge. And I'm looking up at the Sierra Nevadas, and this day was just one of those crisp fall days, blue skies, not a cloud in the sky. So the lodgepole pines are lined up in droves, and that blue sky is just, that blue and green playing off each other is just so bright and so clear. And I'm looking out at this little, clear lake, And I just began to weep. I had put in my manifestations that I wanted to be near lakes where I can, and that's where I wanted to live, so I could write and I could swim and meditate. I wanted somewhere quiet. So I did want somewhere that wasn't super busy. So even though I didn't know anybody going into this town, I've never had a problem making friends anywhere I go. I'm pretty friendly, even though I need my alone time. But when I am out, I usually have no problem, meeting people, and read Akashic records for clients. And swim all the time. Did I say swimming? And eventually I really wanted to get a stand-up paddleboard, and I could tote it around in my car rack. I already have a car rack. The car came with a rack. This is me. This is me, and this is what I kind of put out for myself. And so it was a good cry and a good wow, this is kind of happening. This has been a hard road, but this can kind of be attained, this life that would help feed my soul and all the things that make me me and get me to that place of ease, right? When times are tough. So the kitchen inside the house has these 3 windows in it, and they overlook the side yard. And I can actually see my neighbor's house, and actually inside my neighbor's house if their blinds are drawn, and I'm sure vice versa, because we had the exact same design. They mirrored the windows. So if I had a window in the kitchen, or if I had a window, they spaced them exactly across from each other. There wasn't let's, maybe put it at a catty corner or something. So that's kind of weird. But so there's these nice big windows, though, so light came in the kitchen, which was so nice. And most mornings I'm sweeping. It's just a morning thing I do. Usually the cat, around the cat litter boxes and, anything else from the day before. It's just a morning thing I do. And this particular morning I was sweeping, and I'm still in my PJs. And these PJs were, I'd had them for 3 years, a black, just shirt dress, nothing fancy, just a little shirt dress. But I had had it for 3 years, and then it had been a part of my COVID uniform. I was in that all the time, right? Remember when we were told to stay at home, you would go back and forth between staying in your pajamas all day, being in leggings, whatever, and this was the pajamas that I would be in. So those things had taken a hit. And even though it was black and it wasn't see-through when I bought it, it was probably not, it was probably kind of see-through by this time. In fact, it was, because I'd washed it so much. I'd worn it so much and washed it so much. And so I had bent over to scoop the litter into the dustpan because I was sweeping around the cat litter boxes. And when I stood up, I saw a man creeping on the side of my house. And when I say creeping on the side of my house, he was literally, his body was on the house. If you were to get to that side of the house where I could see where I'm describing to you, from the front of the home, you have got to wedge yourself between the house and a tall bush. And there wasn't a lot of space. You had to turn sideways, and you kind of had to inch yourself. You could make it through. It's not like it was super overgrown or anything like that. But it wasn't one of those things where you're walking straight, or, you're definitely having to make your body smaller to get through that little area. And so I'm like, what's this person doing, right? And so I knocked on the window because I'm right there, And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm doing maintenance. And I'm like, I didn't call for any maintenance. What are you doing in my yard? And he was like, oh, I do maintenance for the like 80% of the homes in this area. And I said, I met you on my driveway a couple of weeks ago. What are you doing in my yard? I told you I didn't want your services. And he holds up this key ring with a million keys on it. So, I mean, okay, yeah, you probably do service most of the homes in this neighborhood. But I didn't ask for your services. And he's like, oh, well, I just, on Wednesdays between 9 and noon, I am doing, landscaping work. I'm like, but not in my yard, because I didn't ask for your services. Because the only way to go from, if you squeeze like he did against my house, it's not like he was in the other person's, even though I could see it and there wasn't a proper fence between my side yard and the neighbors, like it's very clearly, the line is very clear. They had placed these rocks a certain way. So, I mean, it was pretty clear whose property was who. I mean, you might, a couple inches or something might be is it 2 inches on yours or 2 inches on mine? But like walking, whose side you're on. And so I said, you don't belong in my yard. I need you to leave. You need to leave, or else I'm going to call the cops. And, he says, he kept saying, basically, he was entitled to be there. And I was like, you are never entitled to be here. He never apologized for scaring me. Like, you scared the crap out of me. You're some man creeping around a yard, and you had to squeeze against my home to get into my side yard. It's not like, oh, wait, I'm in the wrong yard. Their house is gray, mine is dark green. There's just no way. There's no reason for you to be here, and so get away. And so he finally left, and I'm shaking, and I'm like, what the fuck? What is going on? And this is when Tom number 3 becomes Tom number 2 because it rhymes with poo. And that's just what I do when I have a lot of time and I'm alone, and this is what goes through my head. So that was really unnerving. And I thought, in all of the places I've lived in, and I've lived in a lot of places, the only times I felt, I had one experience when I was younger living in the San Francisco Bay Area where I was followed. My girlfriend and I were followed coming from a punk rock show in Berkeley. One time, all the other times I felt threatened, or like, I'm here alone, like I'm in that scenario, like I was with this man, has been in these like smaller, predominantly white towns with these entitled men who think they can just kind of go wherever. And I'm like, you do not get to go wherever you want to go, especially somebody else's property. Like, when is that ever okay? And, it happened when I lived in southern Colorado in a small town, and these two boys, well, they were, probably 20-somethings, but they were missionaries, and they had already approached me and my ex together, and we said, we're not interested, but thank you. We were very kind. There was nothing mean or unkind. And they must have seen him leave, because he went to work and I was there at the house, and it was back when I had a cell phone and a landline, and those little fuckers came back to my porch and were like, we want to talk. And I was like, I just talked to you and said, I'm not interested. What's your problem? Oh, I said, listen, you get off my porch right now, or I'm calling the cops, because you do not belong here. And that's, again, what is wrong with these people? Anyways, that was very unnerving and made me feel really uneasy. And, every time I saw that guy, I pretty much cursed him under my breath. Right? I mean, screw that dude. And he always had a scowl on his face. This man, always had a scowl on his face. And I ended up vending at the garden center, which I did quite a bit when I was there. Oh my goodness. Thank goodness for the garden center. Such a great little place in Blairsden. They've got amazing plants, amazing gifts, and there's a market that happens every weekend in the summer and then through the holidays. But I was vending, and one of the guys vending next to me is vending these awesome tie-dye shirts and bags. And we started talking. I told him where I lived, and he's like, oh my God, I used to work for, Tom, that cokehead, da da da. That guy's just, a drunk and a cokehead. And I'm like, well, that kind of would make sense then, that somebody would be so delusional to come into somebody's yard and act like they're okay being there. When you've told them I told him twice now. I mean, I saw one of his workers and said, oh, hey, we're not on your roster anymore. New owners. Okay. And then him coming to my driveway. Right. So this man had been told twice that, your services aren't needed here, but thank you. And still felt entitled to come onto somebody's private property. So that winter was especially rough. In a small town, we're in a pandemic. We went on tier, I forget what it was now, Reddit or whatever. Okay, stay at home, don't gather, just go to the grocery store. I applied for the pandemic unemployment insurance assistance in California, and I got disqualified, even though I went over all the paperwork and thought I was turning in everything I was supposed to, and you could not get a hold of somebody to save your life. Well, you could, and it would take a couple months, and I did it once, and I was like caller number 13. I thought I won the lottery, and I think it was maybe asking the question, why am I disqualified? Or, no, it was before I even got the disqualifying letter. They said, I just want to make sure I was sending everything in correct. She said, yeah. So to get disqualified, like, what the heck? So, okay, what am I supposed to do? My savings had pretty much dwindled by now. And every single online job I applied at, I'm not kidding, rejected me. Some after the second interview. So I would get to, like, a second interview. Most it was silently, So that was really tough. Like, well, I'm out here, with no opportunities. I mean, no place was hiring. They're closed, a coffee shop or whatever. I mean, maybe they were open, but, the person that owned it or was there already was, probably hanging on to their job. I did do readings at that market a couple times until Halloween. And then they were gearing up for a holiday market, and I thought, I will start making my buckwheat hull-filled pillows, which I call the infinite pillow. Back then, I was just making them for clients or like other MTs, other massage therapists, and for my massage practice. But I thought, let me just make a bunch of them, right? And thank goodness too, so I had the market to look forward to, and, I was outside, so even though things were, still iffy as far as the pandemic went, we were outside, and the Garden Ladies doubled as a book club, and we read some really great books. Oh my God, I totally forgot to write my favorite one down. Oh my gosh, I'm going to remember it and I'll post it. But we read some great books. And we would meet in person, like, I don't know, maybe the one time. And then the rest were on Zoom. And, it was really stressful going to the grocery store there. Gas. I had to get gas. And the town that was 25 miles away, Quincy, had a Safeway, or has a Safeway, and they have it's called a grocery outlet, and they have produce, and then they have a lot of, like, things are just discounted. It's kind of like, it's almost like Sprouts, but it's, I guess, maybe kind of like a Sprouts. But then they have, deep discounts on things, which is so nice. And that was amazing. And that was like my social outlet half the time, was going there. But, if I needed like animal, cat food or cat litter, certain things I would get at like a larger place, or clothes or anything else, you drive into Reno. And, if you plan for that and you have income, it's not probably a big deal. But if you don't, then it's a little daunting to make that drive, because it's an hour each way. In the periodontist, the access to healthcare out there for myself and my cats was really tough. Nothing was close. The only periodontists nearby that were affordable were in Reno. And the only periodontists in California under like Medi-Cal were in Napa or Fairfield, which is about an hour and a half outside of Sacramento, heading towards the Bay Area. So like that's like a 3-hour drive. Napa probably 4. Like, are you kidding me? Okay. So again, stressed about how am I going to care for myself? How am I going to get my animals anywhere if something's wrong with them? The one guy that was close wasn't taking any new clients or patients. And then the other one that was a little further in that town, Quincy, had a bad reputation, but I ended up having to take Daxter there a couple times just because he was still on the mend from having his crystals in his urethra from the summer before. So I would get done with the drive if I did go into Reno for whatever. And thank goodness I never had to take the cats with me for anything. Daxter especially does not do well on drives. He usually wets his carrier. So it's really stressful because I know he's stressed out. He might, urinate, may throw up. So I'm worried about him. So if I went out, like say I had to go to the periodontist, I would always double it for, okay, let me get some groceries or let me get, stock up on cat food or, something like that. So I was usually gone for a good chunk of the day. So a lot of the times when I would get home from one of these trucks, and again, just stressed, all the things about it just stressed me out for so many reasons. I would come back, stand in my kitchen and yell, fuck. I would just stand there and just like swear. And I'm thinking, what is wrong? Like, okay, I know things are stressful and, but I was like beside myself. And the neighbors to the left, I didn't have any neighbors on the right, were part-timers. And then the neighbors behind me, Audie and Tom, number 4, the 4th Tom, she couldn't hear very good. And because they were close though, they were kind of close. So I was kind of glad she couldn't hear super great. And Peanut, their little Shih Tzu, was always, no, he wasn't a Shih Tzu, or she wasn't a Shih Tzu. What is it called? Little bit brown, like kind of like the not super long hair. Oh my God, she was so cute. But she barked a lot. I'm like, okay, so they're not hearing anything. But that would happen more than once. And I think one time I even flipped the house off. I just had such a hard time there. The aloneness, is it the aloneness? I like being alone. I like my alone time. I like space. Not knowing anyone. Gosh, I make friends everywhere I go. I usually have no problem. I'll talk to somebody at the grocery store. Hey, whatever, nice shirt, nice sunnies. I mean, whatever. I'll just kind of strike up a conversation. If somebody has a dog, I usually say, oh, are they friendly? Can I, interact with them? I think looking back now, it was the lack of hope. All the planned things had gone out the wayside, right? And it was pretty hard to rebuild a full practice to where it was in Colorado. I was seeing clients, by the way. I would see some clients, and, I got around word of mouth. When I vended at that garden center's market, one of the massage therapists in town saw me, and she saw my sign because it says, Akashic Records, chakra clearings, and here's that meditating alien logo I have. She's like, here you are. You're out in the open. Like, here I am. I do these psychic readings and I do these chakra clearings and, this is who I am. And she was like, this is great. And I ended up doing readings on her, and she did body work on me. She's lovely, human. And, that was just so nice. So I was doing some things, but, not having that source of income really messes with your head. I wasn't able to help out with the mortgage or any of the bills. And, I was still going through the tail end of the last dark night of my ego, dark night of the soul. And, I look into the mirror, and I did not recognize the woman looking back at me. My eyes looked so dark, like the skin around my eyes looked so dark. I just feel like the light was hard to find, and I looked so sad. Like I just was carrying around the pain and the suffering of my experiences. And, looking back, I was carrying around the rejection. I had been rejected by my soulmate, not the man I lived with for 14 years. I fell out of love with him, and I didn't want, it was a mutual, okay, should we try to make it work? Is this just a phase? That was a long time we were together. Or, no, we need to go our separate ways in order to, do what we need to do. And so there wasn't rejection there, but my soulmate had rejected me, and I had some, traumatizing experiences in Colorado before I left, ending friendships, which maybe weren't so rejected, but I think the rejection of a soul connection is so tough to finagle through, especially then when you go through another tough time of, here I am in a new place trying to make things work and nothing's panning out like I thought. I think I was just wearing like in a rejection like button, like badge, right? Like here I am. Here, rejection was like following me around, and I wore it. I saw it on my face. And on top of all of this, that propane tank was non-existent, and there was no gas meter because the house was entirely electric. It was stated in the paperwork or the, flyer, gas, heated by gas, blah, blah, blah. Asked the most terrible realtor, hey, how's the gas bill in the winter? Oh, like $150 a month. Okay, it's high, but, we can make that work. Somewhere probably tucked in that mountain of paperwork you get when you buy a home was that the whole home was electric. And by the way, an electric bill on average that winter on that home, and it was a 1,200 square foot home, was $400 a month. And the water was like $200 a month. There's some crazy because there was a pump. It was separate than the golf course, but I'm like, what the fuck? Who's paying this? That's a plane ticket somewhere. I don't want to pay that for the home to be watered and heated. So I just felt like it was like I was drowning, right? Like, how am I even gonna get, this isn't normal. This isn't normal things that you would pay for a home that's, there was nothing fancy about the home. It was pretty standard 1980s, built home. I mean, it needed to be updated, but it wasn't a fancy pants home by any means. So, it was beyond hopeless feelings a lot of the days, many of the days. How am I going to get past this? So because none of those plans were working out and my anxiety was just getting worse, I mean, it was just skyrocketing. We all decided that, this home is not a good fit for me to stay in on any level at that point, or to be a financial, investment. Because you couldn't make that money back. Because even when nobody was in the home, and it was like, I think the last electric bill, like let's say for April, okay, so not super cold or hot or anything. I think it was like $80 with no one in the home. Like that's what I'm used to normally paying in the winter, right? So, and we didn't even have to talk about it. Like we talked about it, but it's not like we had to discuss. We're like, yep, let's start to get this thing. Let's start to get these wheels turning to not be here anymore. I would live in Tamarack Court for 9 whole months. And boy, did I feel relief of having the burden of not having to make that home work, right? I did, however, have enough sense to start this podcast. So yay. Because it was started in February of 2021 of this year. And I know these are long-winded, and I really appreciate you listening to Moving in the Time of COVID stories. It was a lot, and to do this generational healing, those lodgepole pines that surrounded that whole area, that's what those kinds of trees are good for. They're really amazing at helping hug you. I felt hugged by them, although I did, for the first time in my life, chase the sun, because there's so many of them, and because my skin is so sensitive, I always chase the shade. Like I always have a shade tent, an umbrella, a hat, whatever, when I'm in a sunny area. And here I was chasing the sun because there was so much shade. Hello, am I going into the shadows? Yes, I am. And I'm going deep. And how are we going to transmute this? And with a lot of forested area and trees such as that comes lots of fairies. And I'm very aware of all the energy in that regards. And I did have what I called a bad fairy right out the front door. He lived right out the front door. He was not nice. He was menacing. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about him. He was kind of mean. And being that I was so distraught, it wasn't great to have that kind of energy. And I mean, nobody ever wants that kind of energy. But after I cleared his energy away, and there was something that had gone on. No, it wasn't with that. But after about, it was like 2.5 months after I moved in and I cleared that energy, and the healing started to happen. I started to feel less anxiety, and I could really kind of get that into that healing space, as opposed to the, level 10 anxiety freaking out, flipping off the house, swearing at it, right? I mean, I needed to get calm and focus on the future. So, and doing the podcast was a part of that. How can I talk my talk, and continue to do what I do on some level, right? Of a more consistent basis. And that's what the podcast really helped with too. And, it was a little hard though, thinking, I'm in a quiet area. I mean, golfing's not necessarily a loud sport, right? Dangerous, but not loud. And the little neighborhood I was in was really loud. The maintenance people were there 2 and 3 days a week, with large equipment. And, nobody had more than like a postage stamp worth of a grass patch, which is pretty par for the course in California. Obviously they're going to take care of the golf course, but I mean, it's not like it's right there. But to have it literally like in your neighbor, front door, back door, side, caddy corner, it was hard to get that quiet time that I would think I would have. I mean, it was hard to sit on my back deck and listen to the birds because there was always something that you would associate with a city sound. But, a lot of times there's that white noise that a city has, which is nice, like whether you hear, the cars going by or anything like that. But this was loud, and it was a loud little neighborhood, thinking I'm in a quiet area. So that was tough too. As you can hear the train going by, but the train did go by in Blairsden. In fact, the garden center where I vended, it was right there, right, like, above you. I mean, we waved to the train conductor. He could see you, which was kind of cool to hear when it's off in the distance, like it is here, and. So that was the Blairsden experience. And like I said, there were some amazing people I met. And I feel like I always meet amazing people, too. And, that garden center, what garden center had, Lauren ran that, and she is just like, she loves Reiki and, the Akashic readings and the garden ladies, especially Pat, just kind of really kind of got, I think, everything that was happening. And Pam at the shop is just a neat person, another great little place to go to get gifts. Monica with her amazing massage therapist, and she just opened a yoga studio. She's also a yoga teacher, and so that's right there. I would be there every week if I was still living in Blairsden. And then Holly at the community center, I had talked with her about doing the guided meditations, and we did them, I think, once or twice, her and I. And then we got told we can't, come in groups. But she's a really great energy. And Andrea, who was my first Akashic client in Blairsden. So that's really special to me. And like I said, you can always find, I think, your people, even in the middle of a pandemic. But like I said, that house just was not meant to be lived in. It was meant to do this healing, and, there was a lot of crying, a lot of fighting, the fighting that would go on between my folks and I had nothing to do with the house. It was more about judging. And so, kind of coming to clarity with that and working through that. And cool thing is, so the house sold in May, and we did the final walkthrough, and I took pictures, and I'll post them again on my social media. The house just had the biggest beams of light coming through every window. And it was like 4:00 in the afternoon. This house was covered. There was trees everywhere. I would get light in the house, and there was windows in every room. But the one side of the home didn't have a lot of windows. I don't know why they did. And that was the area where I had the empty space. It was like a yard that was the property of, our property. There was no windows on that side of the house. But walking through, all this light, these light orbs, this healing energy, the transmutation happened. And so that's what we want, right? We want that transmutation to happen. It's not always pretty going through the parts. And when you go through a lot and there's lots of different elements, it's hard to get clear. It's hard to know to get your head clear, I think. And then having all the uncertainty, it was very daunting, but healing. And the house showed that. The house showed the healing. And funny enough, just this morning, and I haven't had a chance to respond to her because I'm on a staycation, but I'm still working, but not with clients. Oh, well. That's how it goes sometimes. So I'm trying not to communicate too much with people, just to have some sense of, I'm doing something different. But I had somebody who lived in Blairsden. She was going to come to one of my meditations, message me about Beckworth Peak. And she said, hey, I was hanging out with somebody the other day, and they looked up at Beckworth Peak and said, it is one of the most healing peaks in the United States. And she's like, I know you do this kind of work. What do you think? And, well, from personal experience, I'd say, yeah, that peak's got some healing, major healing energy coming from it, right? But, in all the different ones that we know about or that are more commonly known, we don't hear about a Beckworth Peak. But, the La Sierras, it's a less populated area. So, maybe it's just something that not a lot of people have experienced. And I didn't get to explore as much as I wanted to in that area. There was definitely a lot more hiking that I wanted to get to. But, with it being the smoke and then it was hard to get my groove. I was definitely having a hard time getting into a groove when I was there going through all of that. But I thought that was kind of cool. So yeah, after 9 long and painful months in Plumas County, transmuting generational patterns, I'd say that the Beckworth Peak definitely is a huge healer. And again, this is, an area that's, that area, Beckworth, is a little bit less further away. Probably maybe 40 minutes, 45 minutes. So definitely could be explored again. And also Rose is another wonderful healer in the area of Great Eagle, which is a little town right next to Blairsden. So again, there's just through the pain, I was able to make connections still, and that's always nice. Even when I looked in the mirror and didn't quite recognize who was looking back at me, that, that soul, that core values of your soul is still there, through all the different aspects of your journey. And I wanted to share this portion of my journey with you so that you could understand and see that, and it's hard to see all of this when we're going through it. We're dealing with the day-to-day. So I hope that sharing these experiences with you brings you some maybe clarity, ease, connection, maybe a little laugh. I try to look back at things and go, all right, that was kind of funny, the scary stuff, not so great, but they are a part of life, and I hope you will continue to join me in this infinite dance that we're all a part of. And let's see, the rest of, so we're going into October, and the rest of October is going to be interviews with guests with spooky stories, Discarnate Souls, people that have interacted with non-embodied souls. So I'm really excited for that. I'm really excited to bring more guests on. It's something I've been wanting to do since the beginning. So I'm really, really, really looking forward to my guests that will share their stories with you. If you have a story and you'd like to share it or you want it on the podcast, please reach out to me at carrylynarata@gmail.com. If you have a ghost story or a story of, a soul that you interact with regularly and you're curious to why, or if you have a story about moving in the time of COVID, or a COVID story that, it wouldn't have happened to you unless COVID had happened, right? So, kind of interesting when we do that and share our stories. And I do have a training coming up on October 28th. It is on Discarnate Souls, Miasms, and Stalking Entities. You can go to my website, ancientbodyworks.co, to access that information. And it is a training, so it's not just information. It is for, if you can either be doing this work already, or, doing psychic work, or maybe you consider yourself a witch, or you are a witch, and you're just looking for, Akashic protocols with things. This training is for you, or maybe you're just curious. But it's a training. There will be ritual. There will be meditation within it also. But I want you to see it as a training. And there's 2 options for tuition. So you can make the option whatever one works best for you. And I am on Facebook at The Infinite Dance, and Instagram as Ancient Bodyworks. You can reach out to me at any of those. Listener support helps this podcast to continue going. I will provide links of where you could offer a one-time payment, or I also have a Patreon for support. I'm on YouTube also, where I do post guided meditations that you could access at your convenience. So I look forward to continuing to bring you interesting content that have to do with our soul's journey. And I will continue to keep peeling back the layers. And I hope you do too. And continue to ask yourselves and each other, may I have this dance?